Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. I hope you're having a great evening as always. And I'm here with Ethan, who goes by
Hi.
ProLib, who goes by Progressive Liberal. And we
Hi.
thought we'd have a sort of open discussion about stuff,
About stuff, about
about
things and
stuff,
stuff.
stuff and things. And we would both learn things because that's always positive. See,
hmm
being a good conservative, I still believe in open discussion and dialogue. And I
So
believe that
there's one
maybe
of you. Okay.
yeah, that's right. Right. That's right. Well, some of your brethren on your side of the fence seem to be saying things like
Oh,
speech is violence and also silence is violence. So I'm not sure how that works, but okay.
okay. Well, we can talk about that. We can talk
Fair
about that.
enough. And we're also brought here by our mutual mod, Tony, who apparently wants to watch the world burn.
Yes, I see a couple of my peeps in chat. Thank you guys for coming over here and supporting this. This is we talked about doing this at least like 2 months ago, something like that, when you were on in time.
Yeah.
And then we just didn't. And then you came into my Discord night. You're like, "Hey, you want to?" And I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, Tony,
That
Tony,
was hard.
Tony, Tony bugged me. He's like, "You want to go there?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. What the hell?" It
Right.
sounds like fun. I got
We were
nothing better to
supposed
do
to
right now.
do Right, we were supposed to have a panel tonight on my channel for COVID, because I got a lot of people in my audience that are like biologists and infectious disease experts and stuff. So we were just going to have an open panel where people could do questions, but almost all of them were unavailable tonight, so we had to postpone it. So I wasn't doing anything. I was going to play video games on Twitch. That's it. That was
Excellent.
my big plan.
I
So,
just play. I just played the game Detroit Becomes Human. That was fun.
oh yeah, I haven't played that yet. Is that good?
Yeah, the gameplay itself leaves a lot to be desired, but the story is a lot of fun. So the premise of it is it's 2038. Androids have become sentient, and so you play three main characters at different frames. So you're playing three different AIs, one of which is trying to hunt down the other ones and stuff. So it's a
So it's a
little
bit little Blade Runner, a
little
little
Blade
Star Trek
Runner,
Picard.
a little Star Trek Picard, yeah, a little bit of that stuff. So it was
Cool.
really interesting narratively. So it was
All
like
right.
an interactive movie, and they branching because at the end you get to see like what path you took and what options there were, and like the branching paths, man. The branching paths is like there
Yeah.
were so many ways I could have
Okay.
gone, you
I got to
know.
check that out. I got to check that
So
out.
it was fun.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so we can start wherever you want. You want to start with Citizens United?
Let's start with Citizens United. Can you give us the primer on Citizens United? Or I
Uh,
can if you want, but
Sure. Either way, it's fine by me, but I'll go for it. Yeah, Citizens
okay.
United was a major U.S. Supreme Court case that essentially changed the network setting real fast. I don't want to interrupt you, so
Go
give me
ahead.
1 second, everyone.
You're good.
Should we reconnect before we actually start again? Okay, cool. I think we're back on. So yeah, I had to disconnect the VPN because it was making things too buffery. But continue where you were. Are you there? Did I lose you? Uh-oh. We may have lost ProLib. I think I lost him completely. If you're out there, please come back. Baby, come back. You like a fool to me. We got frozen ProLib. That's my bad. I forgot to change the thing and I've lost him. But he was about to explain to me why Citizens United was wrong. Yeah, NordVPN is not the greatest VPN when it comes to live streaming, apparently. So I'm waiting for him to come back. He's in my chat. I'm looking for him. Yeah, I'm looking for you. Can you I'll remove you as a stream and I'll add you back. No, you're still frozen in time for some reason when I add you. You might have to like refresh your browser or something, ProLib, and that's my fault, and I apologize. If it winds up that I have to just discontinue the stream and start over from square, I will, but because that's on me. We're having a fine day. We're trying to get ProLib back into the stream. His stream still looks completely frozen. Yeah, I'm waiting actually on you, ProLib. Actually, I don't think there's. Let me just refresh my browser. Hold on, everyone. Bear with me. I'm going to disappear. All right, so do that. Add this. Add me. Great. You
There
there?
we go. There we go. I had to refresh.
And let me change the browser window because everyone's looking at YouTube, and that is not helpful for anything.
I mean, it depends. It might be.
It's not helpful for discussion.
Right. Well, no, that it would not be, I don't think.
Properties, StreamYard. Great. Now, except for me being gigantic, so now I have to redo all the settings. I hate OBS sometimes. Well,
No, he's saying that.
Mostly it's because I'm incompetent.
Right. This is why I didn't want to do it, because I knew I was going to mess everything up tonight. So I figure I'll let you mess everything up, because
There we go.
then it's not my fault.
Look at that. We're back. Yay.
Hey,
We're back and everyone can see us again. Yay.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, so we're talking about Citizens United, and I tried to explain it, and then I interrupted you. So where were we?
I don't. Let's just start. Okay, Citizens United v. FEC decision in 2010 that said basically corporations, since corporations are legally people, they have a right to make their political opinions heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my issue is not with that decision, because that on its face I agree with. If that is true, if it's true, hold on. If it's true that corporations are people, then their political feelings should be right. They should be able to express them in any way that they see fit. That I agree with. My issue is that corporations are not citizens.
Sure.
My other issue is that the First Amendment, not even the First Amendment, the entire revolution was about removing corruption from government. That's why we formed our own nation, is because we had a nation that was so infested with corruption, the monarchy, that we had to form our own, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't phrase that as looking to end corruption. I look at it as trying to change governmental forms. So I think I wouldn't say it as broadly as you did, but
with the desire of removing corruption, no taxation without representation. That was the problem. The problem was that the people weren't being represented in a way that they felt was fair with how much tax they had to pay. The two did not correlate equally, in their opinion. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just okay. I don't quite like the when you say its desires to end corruption or corruption, because what is corrupt is somewhat in the eye of the beholder. And so
no, sure.
So whether or not whether or not taxation without representation is corruption is somewhat an opinion at the end of the day. Now, I think, of course, it was, and it was good cause, but I don't think I don't think it was meant to create a corrupt-free government. It was meant to create a government fundamentally based on the premise of the people as a collective or sovereign, as opposed to the king being sovereign.
Sure. No, I agree with that. That's why I've never, I don't want to get into unitary executive. I shouldn't even say that word, because then we'll be here all night. But no, I agree with you. I think fundamentally the Citizens United argument is about our interpretation of what the framers themselves meant when they wrote the First Amendment.
Sure.
At the time, corporations were very different things than what they are today. A corporation existed with a charter for a certain project. When the project was over, the charter went away. Corporations didn't exist.
Well, I would have to challenge you, because a lot of companies were very long-lasting in antiquity, and not just American companies. I mean, we can go to England.
I didn't say companies. I didn't say companies. I said corporations. I'm not talking about companies. There's been plenty of companies that have been around for hundreds of years, even a century. There's a wine maker,
sure.
cheese maker in France that's 1,300 years old or something. No,
so
I'm not talking about companies.
I guess you might have to separate the difference between company and corporation then.
Well, but I think in Citizens United they did, and I think this is the fundamental. I don't think you and I are ever going to agree on this. This is where we're not ever going to agree, right? Because I think Citizens United Let me say it.
Well,
Let me say that a different way.
I mean,
I
I apologize for interrupting you. It's just that
You're okay.
because like you said something, and I'm like, I'm not sure I understand the difference. And so it was out of a genuine desire to inquire,
Sure.
because
Sure.
if as I try to say on my channel, if I'm stupid, I'd like to be less stupid. And so, like
Right.
you say two
I
things,
agree.
I'm like, oh, those might be the same thing.
No, you're
So
fine. You're okay.
if I'm getting you off where you want to be, but my question was out of a desire to try to figure out if there's a point of separation. Uh,
No, and that's fair. I am not a person that shies away from criticism. I like having people on my channel that disagree with me. I think that it's more interesting, right? Like if I just sit around and have other progressives on and we talk about how great progressivism
sure.
is,
Yeah.
it's boring. So no, you're totally fine. If you need me to clarify something, please feel free. I'm going to do the same thing to you.
Fair
But
enough.
I think I agree that fundamentally corporations should have the right to express themselves politically. My issue is that the uncapped ability to do so outweighs the ability of labor unions and normal people to counteract those messages. So when corporations can put together $3.4 billion, no one else can equal that, right? That's the issue, is that it creates an unfair balance in the narrative. Listen, do you remember when Target backed I think it was a candidate for Senate who was anti-LGBTQ, and there were picket lines out in front of Targets? Do you remember? This was in 2012 or something like that.
Can't say I do. I'm sorry.
Okay. So my point is, if corporations are going to do stupid, can I cuss here? Is cussing
Sure.
here okay? Okay. So if they're going to do stupid shit like that, if they're going to play stupid games, they should win stupid prizes. I'm totally fine with them winning stupid prizes and wasting money. My issue is with creating an imbalance where corporations can be louder than normal people. Because if everybody's a citizen, then everybody deserves, if everybody has the right to speak, everybody should have an equal right to speak. That's my problem. There's
Okay.
another piece of, it's a lawsuit, and I can't remember what it is. It's working its way through the courts right now, whose aim is to end Citizens United. It's not there's also somebody trying to push a constitutional amendment that would end Citizens United, and I'm not talking about that. This is a different case that's pushing just to end super PACs and say super PACs are out of bounds. And I support that. I don't want unfair representation. I'm fine with corporations putting out money to support candidates if they want to. I don't fundamentally have an issue with that. My issue is with the unfair amount of money they can put together with super PACs. I think that should be outlawed.
Fair enough. I do want to acknowledge the super chat, which we may get to in substance later, but from John Smith gave me $20 and said, I have a question, and it's about the Second Amendment and these states with restrictive gun laws. Despite the rulings in Heller v. DC and McDonald v. Chicago, how can states have these laws? We might get into that, but first, before we get to the Second Amendment, let's try to or at least discuss more the First Amendment.
Right, there's
finish.
27 of them.
I said
let's go one at a
finish,
time.
and then I immediately interrupted myself. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Get closer. All right, so the first thing I would note is that, putting aside the issue of corporations or companies, and we just look at the citizens and their ability to speak on their own merit, that as a practical matter is not and has never been practically equal, because individuals have different capacity to speak based on money, at least in part.
Sure.
If you view, for example, reading as an ability to, as a First Amendment interest, then people can buy books or not based on money. People can write newsletters or not. People like you and I, who have access to at least some money, have a microphone to speak on and a video camera to record on and an internet able to distribute it. So we have some ability to speak that other people wouldn't. And so I think the right of freedom of speech is equal, and everyone has the right to stand on the street corner and speak their heart out. But in 1790 and today, the practical effect of that has always been tied to money. And so I don't think that's a corporation versus person problem. As to corporation versus company, I'm still not sure what the difference is. There are a lot of companies / corporations which are by their nature political. You put the labor unions as an example. I mean, those exist as corporate forms, Um, there are a lot of non-for-profits, ACLU, NRA, Human Rights Campaign, pick your organizations of Red Cross. There are a lot of organizations which have political interests. And so the corporation, and there's also profit corporations that have huge speech interests, major newspapers, major publication houses. They're for profit, and their First Amendment interest is paramount. So I think some of the dividing lines that you create between people and corporations is not 100% clear to me. The other thing that comes to my mind is I think it is specifically because of Citizens United that we have an opportunity to compete against, the Koch brothers or Rupert Murdoch or Targets of the world. It is because you and I can put $5, $10, $20 into a super PAC for the Human Rights Campaign or the ACLU or pick your organization of choice, that we can, through the collection of our assets, speak louder than any one of us can. And it is through our collective action that we can truly compete and do compete on a level playing field. Without Citizens United, we wouldn't have the ability to do that, and would only be the super rich who would be spending their own money who would have any ability to speak practically at all. Because we can pool our money, we're at least in the game. So I think on a practical level, I disagree with you as well.
I see what you're saying. I go back to those 2016 numbers. $3.4 billion was spent by corporations versus $213 million by the labor unions, right? So that's a huge disparity. That's 16 times the amount of money, something like that. So that I disagree with. Also, your premise assumes that I'm also not wanting other reforms, which I do. I want all corporate money out of politics. I don't like any corporate money, any non-person or non-profit money. I don't want it in politics. I'm totally fine with the ACLUs, with the heritage foundations, with any of those, even God, we're going to get into this. Some limited religious donations, but it would be in a very specific way, and they'd have to organize in a specific way. I can get into all of that, what I would like, if you want me to. But it would have to come from a nonprofit source, and it would have to be for a nonprofit reason. Obviously, super PACs are nonprofit, so I mean that's a given. But I don't. My issue specifically is the ability of companies, the ability of non-people, because I fundamentally disagree that corporations are people, but I understand that the Supreme Court disagrees with me. It's one of those situations where I get it. I'm not going to change the Supreme Court's mind anytime soon. So I accept that corporations are people. And if I don't want that to be the truth, it's just a thing I have to deal with.
But even if you don't view corporations as such as people, when you're talking about advocacy groups in particular, which is what we're usually talking about in super PACs, is advocacy organizations. There are people behind those. So it is collections of people who want to come together for a common purpose. So the idea is that I believe in an issue, you believe in an issue, we can combine our money and we can do things that we wouldn't be able to do individually in promoting that issue. And if we can't combine our money, then neither one of us is rich enough to do that. So I think, I don't know how much money like a Target or organizations like that are giving to political super PACs, but the ones that are there are for the purpose of advocacy. They want to advocate for or against a particular issue. So if you think, if you support transgender rights, for example, and you want to forward that message and you want laws that would be more in favor of that, then as far as I'm concerned, you should be able to pool your money with like-minded people and buy ads and buy billboards and buy magazine spreads or whatever else you think it will do to win hearts and minds. I think that's a good thing.
Well, let me explain a little bit about how my perfect system would work, okay? And I know it's a perfect system, and we're nowhere near it happening anytime soon, but this would be my perfect system. My perfect system would be, if you want to donate to further political ideas, you do that. But you don't donate directly to an organization. If an organization exists and wants to be an advocacy organization, they can apply for some of that money that's in the pot that everybody pulls from. So there would be some sort of date involved, by January 31st of the election year, whatever the date is, right? We'll call it February 20th. February 20th is the last day that you can donate. Okay. Sure. And on February 20th, everybody who's got an advocacy group who's going to advocate for the elections that year gets to apply and say, we've got an advocacy group. Here's our idea. And the pot has, let's say it's got $100 million in it, and there's 100 different advocacy groups. They all get $1 million to go advertise and support things. That's my perfect system.
So in your system, would you fund every group equally? Would they all get the same amount of money?
That would be the idea. Yes. The idea is that if political speech is equal and it's equal under the law and the First Amendment is equal, then everybody gets the same thing. Everybody gets the same amount of money. They all start at the exact same spot, and then they get to go run. Yes.
I know. Well, the Constitution is, to me, a series of negative rights. It's government shall not.
Of course it is. You're a conservative. Of course it is.
Yeah, but, that's how I view things.
Sure.
I feel like, the system that you're proposing would take money out of larger groups and give it money to smaller groups. So
yes,
I mean, in your perfect system,
that's exactly that. Yes,
but in your perfect system, presumably some money that you'd be donating to this pot would go directly to support causes that you don't agree with.
Maybe.
And yeah, and that seems like that would be problematic from your viewpoint for you, because you
Why?
are. Well, because you're endorsing speech you don't agree with.
Yeah, sometimes we all endorse things. I mean, we've all lived under presidents that were of the opposite political affiliation of our, or didn't line up with our political affiliation at all, whatever. Yeah. And we've still supported them as president, right? I mean, that's part of living in a republic, though, is that sometimes you're governed by the minority, or you're governed by affiliations you don't agree with, or you hear things that you don't agree with. People get to protest. They're Nazis and KKK people get to go protest.
I have zero.
That's the society that we live in.
I have zero objection to lawful protests. I have massive problems with rioting and civil unrest, but that's a whole other set of issues. But
well,
for people people want to protest for any cause they believe in. I have no problem with that. And I think they should.
I have counter protested at KKK rallies and Nazi rallies before. Will again once there's not a global pandemic and I don't have a 3-year-old stepdaughter with respiratory issues. And riots are the language of the unheard. I never support violence in any way, shape, or form, but I understand it.
Those two thoughts don't seem to quite go into the same universe. But
we're on YouTube. I can't advocate for violence on YouTube.
Fair enough.
But riots are the language of the unheard, and I'm listening.
$5 from Nicholas Lamar Suter. Hello, how are you doing? How about in non-donations? They donate through FEC. They give candidate ban revealing source. Support the candidate. No quid pro quo. I mean, first of all, quid pro quo. I know that this is going to be a technical point, but quid pro quo is illegal. That's a bribe. You can't do.
Not if you're the president.
Yeah. Well, we'll look past that issue. Maybe if you're the president, accepted. But other than that, you can't do quid pro quo.
All right.
I don't think that I should be forced to support advocacy groups that I don't agree with. I think that if I want to give money to the NRA, I shouldn't be forced to give money to the Brady campaign.
Do you pay taxes?
I do pay taxes.
Do any of your taxes pay for roads?
They do pay for roads.
Do you always drive on every single road that is in your entire city every single day? Do you drive equally on every single road in your city?
No, but I don't object to that.
Okay. I'm just saying. I think speech is different in kind. And and also people I don't agree with use my roads, including maybe you sometimes. Sure. Most of the time. Yes.
They're there for us from the common, but I think speech is different when it comes to freedom of speech. Is also the freedom to remain silent. It's the freedom to not speak. And so I shouldn't be compelled to speak any more than I should be compelled to have particular viewpoints. And and this is also incidentally why on your tax form they have the little checkbox. It's at the top of the form. It doesn't cost you any more in taxes. Some people think it does. It doesn't. But there's a little checkbox on the top of the form that says, would you like to give $3, I think it is currently, to the presidential whatever commission? because it's a funding resource for people running for president that's available.
Right.
And the
Sure.
reason that checkbox exists, where you say it's like the only thing you get to opt into, so you can actually opt out of that tax. And the reason you can opt out is specifically because it's going to speech. And so it's like, yeah, that's difference in
Okay.
kind. You can actually check the little no box on your taxes. So
But my point is, you also pay for taxes that pay for parks and that pay for streets where protests happen that you don't agree with, right? I'm
Yeah.
just saying, when we live in a free society, there's going to be things that happen that we don't agree with. And sometimes we're going to do things that help those things happen, even though we don't agree with them, because we live in a free society and people are allowed to have viewpoints that we don't necessarily have. I don't think that that's a sticking point for me. Listen, do I like it very much that Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby have the stuff that they have about LGBTQ? No, and I don't shop there. I haven't been in a Hobby Lobby in years. I haven't eaten a Chick-fil-A in years.
And presumably you're somewhat pleased by all the corporate statements that are coming of late that are in support of issues that you would be in favor of. And
Absolutely.
so I think it's a good thing that they can come out with those views. And if I disapprove
officially,
views,
when I call it the NFL team in Washington, D.C., I'm correct.
Sure.
Finally.
Yes, because they've said that they will no longer have the same name.
That's correct.
And I have no
I've been calling them that for years,
that.
and now finally that's what they're referred to. It's just the Washington, D.C.
I don't know if
team.
they formally abandoned it already or not, but it's a little bit moot at this point. I think
they
said
did
they were going to, but either way, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I think, we all when it comes to the Constitution, we all have certain rights, and freedom of speech is an enumerated right. Like, I don't have a right to roads, nor do I ever. So if government doesn't want to have roads, they don't have to. If they want to have roads, they can have roads, and that's fine. But
I mean, I would disagree a little bit.
I think people should be able to express their political will and allow their speech to be heard.
But let's think about, we're also forgetting about a fundamental part of the First Amendment in this discussion. The other part of the First Amendment was about the separation of talking about fundamental. I'm talking about, let me finish, is about separation of church and state. I know. Is about separation of church and state, though, right? Like
Congress shall make no law establishing a free or restricting a free religion or establishing one thereto. Yeah, so they can neither establish nor restrict religion. Right.
Correct. And what we forget about in our normal day and time, that was about keeping the state out of religion. Right. It wasn't about keeping religion out of the state. Because you had Protestants, you had Catholics, you had a melting pot of different Christian denominations that were like, I'm Southern Baptist. I don't care what these freakazoids are doing up in New England. Right. Or I'm Catholic, whatever it was. So I think that, to just look at the First Amendment as just, freedom of speech to say whatever I want to say. Sure. But also freedom of me to not have to deal with my government if I don't want to.
Right.
Unless I'm breaking the law or so, obviously. But, the government can't decide what my political affiliations are or my religious affiliations, and I'm allowed to practice or not practice them as I see fit. And so I think when my issue with Citizens United that I've gotten over, it's been 10 years. I've gotten over it, okay? I was really mad in 2010 to 2012 about this. I was super pissed.
There's a lot of people mad. They were standing up at the courthouse and protesting for a while there.
Listen, I was there. I was there at my local courthouse for 2 different protests, actually. I did. At my local court, there was three of us or something. It was a small town. Anyway, my point is that it's about both things. It's about a complete, there should be complete separation of state and religion, and there should be the complete ability of everyone to be able to make their voice heard. I hear what you're saying about money. Ostensibly, if you and I have enough money, we could donate corporations, right? I hear you on that. My problem is unchecked. It's currently unchecked. We're in the second Gilded Age, essentially, and it's the 20s, the 1920s. It looks like we're about to have a repeat of them in the 2020s without COVID. COVID's going to affect everything, obviously. But if you didn't have COVID, I mean, the income gap is almost exactly where it was in 1920. It's scary, like when you look at the percentages. So That is dangerous territory. We do
I think
not want that type of
I'm
income
not
gap.
sure I can let that completely pass without pointing out that everyone is richer. I mean, the income gap may be where it is, but like everyone is richer.
Sure, but but wage growth has stagnated. That's the issue.
That's true.
The issue is the income gap plus wage stagnation. I mean, waiters, service people, anybody who gets tips, their federal earnings are a minimum of $2.13 an hour. In $2.13 an hour in 2020, $2.13 an hour. How is that legal? How is that legal? I don't.
Technically, technically, if they don't make up the difference, the employer is required to bring them to the standard minimum wage. It's under the Bureau of Labor rules.
Technically,
yes. So yes, 213 is the baseline wage. So, but they have to make it up in tips, and if they don't, the employer has to pay the difference. So they are entitled to the same minimum wage as everyone else. So there's that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what is that minimum wage? Do you remember? $7.25 an hour.
I'll take your word for it. It's been a while.
Yes, that's the that's the point. It's been over 10 years since we increased the federal minimum wage.
Yeah.
And we've had inflation since then. Like inflation's a thing.
I think that increasing the minimum wage can be a real problem. I think we've seen that in cities that have increased the minimum wage, that where they increase the minimum wage and it causes a lot of small businesses to shut down and restaurants to shut down that can't afford that huge increase. I'm not so sure the minimum wage is a good idea. I think that allowing people to work and build a skill set that allows them to earn more money is good. And when you set a minimum wage, the problem is if you make me as an employer, if you make me pay someone a minimum wage, I'm going to demand that they can provide me at least that much in service back, right? Because I'm not going to lose money.
But what do you do while you're building that skill set, though? But hold on. If that's true, what about all the people that don't have that skill set yet? Not because they're lazy, but they just haven't built it up yet. They should just like live on the side of the road and sleep under a cardboard box until they've got enough of a skill set to earn a living wage. That's the issue. The issue isn't about people that went to college.
That's where you are now, though. That's exactly the problem. Because
that's where I am. But there's a whole bunch of people who aren't where I am. So I'm not talking about me. I'm fine. I'm talking about all the people. I'm talking about people that are in college, people that are just coming out of high school. What about them?
If you set a minimum wage at $15 an hour, an employer would be insane not to require that person produce at least $15 an hour worth of value to them.
Okay.
And so that means that they are not going to hire people that don't have that value. So that means that anyone who cannot produce at $15 an hour can't get a job. Now, if you had the minimum wage lower than that, they could get a job at what they could do, and then they would earn a skill set that would then enable them to earn more.
I think that you're missing the fundamental issue. If there was no minimum wage and you hire
someone for $1, then they would be able to build a skill set that would allow them to earn more, but they never can get to $15 in the first place.
But I don't think the issue is that we attach value to money, and we say this is what you are worth. Right? Isn't that what we say all the time? Here's what you are worth. Here's what your labor is worth. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Well, your labor does have a value.
Why do we have jobs that exist that don't provide people what they need to live?
That's the wrong question for my frame.
I understand. No, it completely invalidates your argument. I get that. I'm saying, why do we do that?
Well, I don't know that we should, because again, I look at things in a negative rights respect.
Sure.
So
I know
the government should not interfere. So to me, it's like,
then what's the government's purpose for existing? If the government shouldn't be there to protect the people, then why do we have it?
The government's role is to keep everyone free, and the government's fundamental role. The government's fundamental.
I'm already free. I don't need a government to make me free. Governments don't make people free. People make people free.
Well, the problem is that there are bad actors both from within and without, and we need methodologies to deal with those bad actors.
So what we need to talk about is the fundamental difference between conservatism and liberalism, which is the argument we're having right now, which, by the way, everybody, this argument is like 4,000 years old or something that we're having, okay?
A little bit, yes.
Conservatism believes that people are fundamentally bad, and that they need governments to keep them from doing bad things. Left to their own devices is usually how it's framed. Left to their own devices, people will do bad things if government doesn't intervene.
I don't know if
Liberalism,
all people, but enough of them to make it a problem at least.
Sure. We're speaking in generalizations, of course.
Sure.
And liberalism believes, left to their own devices, people will generally leave each other alone and just go live their lives and not bother anybody. So that's where the fundamental disconnect is, that if you believe one way, you're never going to believe the other way, and if you believe that way, you're not. It's one of the oldest arguments that there is. Plato and Socrates argued about this in truth. Essentially, was about the only two things that they ever argued about. I'm being a little facetious there, but
I think even more fundamentally than that, it's like different people have different conceptions of the good, and so this one of the problems is, like, if we were in a discussion, this is like a problem with like Kant and categorical imperatives. It's like, if we were in a room, how many categorical imperatives are there? Now Kant would say one. It's like, if we use pure reason, we can get to one truth. But it's like, no, we believe in different things and we have different values and we weight different things to different degrees. So even assuming everyone is good, what they perceive as the good is in conflict. And so people in their pursuit of good will have tension. And so we need a mechanism to make sure that there's stability, because everyone in pursuit of the good would create a untenable disruption. So yeah, the conservative idea is that, society is hard, organization is hard, and it's easier to break things than it is to build things. It's easier to burn down the skyscraper than it is to build it. So yes, that is the conservative conceit.
Depends on how big the skyscraper is. Some of them you need a whole plane to take down. Ooh. Too soon? I mean, it's been a while at this point.
Yeah, well, still, it's like, yeah. But, I think that man, we're going back to the state of nature, so we can go way deep into Mill and
sure, we can do nature versus nurture, wherever you want to go.
Man in the state of nature is in the state of nature. Every person is their own executor of justice, and by the word executor, we mean that in the most literal sense of the word, in terms of death. That is the justice in the state of nature. So the purpose of government, mankind comes together in a collective to allow a situation for people to engage in collective action where they would not be able to in the state of nature, because people would just steal from each other. There would be endless reprisals. It would be Hatfields and McCoys, endless. And I think society is hard, and the history has shown that, and through its many trials and tribulations, including in its own country. And we need to be concerned that when we get rid of structure, it doesn't necessarily end well. And that isn't to say, of course, that all structure is fundamentally good, but the concept of structure is good, is more in my point.
Right. And I think that authority is inherently dangerous. I think that power is inherently dangerous. And I think that giving people power over other people unchecked is fundamentally a bad thing. And we should do that as little as possible. And anytime somebody has power over somebody else should have equal power to tell them no every single time. Like, that's why we've got a separation of powers. That's why the legislative branch is...
And that's the genius of the Constitution, because both you have the separation of powers in the three branches of government and federalism, and separating the federal government and state government. And so that structure was genius, because you have power checking power. And so it's like, well, how do you get power? How do you supervise power? Who will watch the Watchmen? As it turns out, more Watchmen. You just have this huge Mexican standoff perpetually.
Right.
And that's the way you solve the problem. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's good.
And I think it's interesting you say Mexican standoff, because I think progressives and liberals, more progressive than liberal for sure, believe that we're perpetually inside the Alamo, right? And that we're perpetually under siege, and we need to always be fighting back against power and make sure that power doesn't get too strong. And I think a lot of the BLM protests...
That sounds like a conservative talking point. Is that we make sure
because, well, it depends on who you think the invading army is. Do you think the
Yeah, I
invading
suppose.
army is the guy outside, or is it the guy up in Washington? I think that's the big difference. And I think a lot of the BLM protests are about the exact same thing, because what are they fundamentally about? Police brutality and police over militarization. And you see
Sure.
all of these people. I spoke with Howie Hawkins. Do you know who Howie Hawkins is?
I'm afraid I do not know.
Okay, Howie Hawkins is the presumptive Green Party nominee. And Howie has been an activist since the 60s. He protested with the civil rights and against Vietnam and everything. And I asked him in that interview his thoughts on the Black Lives Matter protest. And he said, when I saw the 1968 riots, and that was mainly black people, and I saw the Vietnam riots, and that was mainly white people. This is the first time in my entire life when I've seen black people and white people together for the same thing. And that's what's so powerful about this movement, because it's crossing race lines, national origin, however you want to say that. It's crossing economic lines. It's crossing even political lines. It's not all conservative versus liberal or Democrat versus Republican. There are people from both political affiliations, or all political affiliations. There's some crossover, some bleed over. Not a lot, but there's some. And,
right, and when it comes to some of the policy proposals from people, that I think some of them are worthy of discussion, if not adoption. I think the demilitarization of the police is a good idea, that they generally have too much of this high-tech equipment that they don't really need, and then then when you give them a tool, they want to use it, which is rational.
And they're using flashbangs against people, like just normal protesters.
Which may be appropriate in some situations, but it's probably not appropriate to the degree they've been using it.
Probably not. And I think it was John Oliver who said they were using pepper spray like sunscreen. I think that was John Oliver. And I was like, absolutely.
In some cases, yes. I remember that famous one where they were all sitting outside of, what was it, Berkeley, and that there's a famous photo of the cop who's coming by with the bear mace.
Oh yeah,
just spraying everybody. They tried to take down like that. That seems inappropriate.
Right, it's
and
not mosquito repellent.
Rubber bullets that are being fired into people's eyes on purpose.
Yeah, I think it was the Washington.
That can't be valid. So,
I think it was the Washington Times, maybe it was the Washington Post. It said they tracked 8 different people blinded on the same day at different protests by rubber bullets. It's there's no reason for it. There's literally zero reason for it.
I do think some of these calls go too far, like the idea of defund the police or get rid of them completely, which apparently seems to be a talking point by some people. It goes way too far. But I certainly believe in reform. I've covered enough qualified immunity cases on my channel.
You have
to be skeptical of some of the police protections that they get. It's like it's too much. We do have a constitution that's supposed to exist, and when they go too far, there should be repercussions for that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think, and I think it gets back to my central...
for whatever it's worth, I felt a little bit. I felt very cynical in the way that the Democrats dealt with the Senate proposal on police reform, because I felt like the Republicans put forward quite a few good ideas. Now, maybe it's not perfect, and maybe other things should have been added to it. But why are we letting perfect be the enemy of the good? Even if it's not everything, why not adopt it and then come back for more? I mean, we're doing that right now with bailouts, where Pelosi's saying, well, maybe we need another bailout. So it's like, okay, just because we passed one doesn't mean we can't pass another. So why not take the Republicans seriously on their proposals, adopt that, and if we need to come back for more, come back for more. But it was dead out the gate. I was like, why? This doesn't make any sense. These were some good ideas, I thought.
Yeah, there was some line item in it that they didn't agree with that I don't recall anymore. And no, some of those proposals were good. I listen, I'm not a person that, I'm not even sure I'm voting for Joe Biden. So I'm not somebody, I pretty much always despise Nancy Pelosi.
He's not an inspirational figure.
Right. I'm not, you're not going to get an argument from me that the Democrats suck. I'm not a huge fan of the Democrats at all. I think
I'm not a huge fan of Trump because he's no intellectual, to put it mildly. He's not doing a very good job of fronting the conservative case.
That's the nicest thing I've heard anyone say about him all day.
Yeah.
But I also spent a lot of time on Reddit.
Fair enough.
Yeah, Trump. Oh, Trump.
He's not a
So I
very good
didn't think
conservative. I don't know what he is. He's a man
he's an
who,
authoritarian.
I don't know that
He's
he's
just an authoritarian.
authoritarian. He's id. He's just like he's not
Yeah,
structured enough to even be authoritarian. He's
yeah.
this
No,
very
that's fair.
weird. He's this very weird character. I think he's not authoritarian. He's definitely had opportunities to be more authoritarian, but he's
Yeah,
so embroiled in his own passions that like, yeah,
he's
he's not a good representative of the conservative cause. Yeah,
I would say he's oligarchical.
he's a
I
little
would say he's
archetypical.
I would say he's um he's a perfect idiocracy candidate. Um he it's a cult of personality. He's just a celebrity with political power. And people have said for a long time that politics is show business for ugly people. I've always loved that because it's true. To be big in politics, you got to be just like a celebrity. You got to be charismatic. You got to get people to like you. You got to get people to believe in you or believe in your message. It's just a popularity contest. It's nothing else. A lot of people don't even realize that senators and representatives rarely sit down and actually write the legislation that they propose. It's usually
Yeah,
written by their staff or by
interest
their
groups.
assistants or interest groups, and then proposed with some small changes that they make. They're really just figureheads. Like,
Yeah.
if you talk about a Devin Nunes, he's a figurehead for his district, and he's a member of a caucus that kind of holds the same ideals, right? And that's true for AOC. It's true for I'm not singling out Devin Nunes. He just was the first one that came up into my head.
Yeah. I
Um,
was I
Go ahead.
while I understood it legally, I was disappointed in it as a policy matter with the gerrymandering decisions from the Supreme Court. The
Right.
Supreme Court was in a tough legal position, so I understood the legal rationale, but I feel like what happened is pretty obvious. Both parties gerrymandered to make safe seats. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Well, now that means if you create a safe seat where it's safe Democrat or self Republican, that means in order to beat them, you can't be the other party. You have to be more of the same party. So it drives everyone to extreme because
Right.
everyone has to out left or out right the other guy. That's the only way to win because now you've homogenized the base. And
Yeah, I
so
remember.
now
Oh, go ahead.
I think the polarization is in large part is in significant part to the districting and how it's being done.
Yeah, I remember early on when the Tea Party first started forming, before it was even called the Tea Party, because I
Yeah.
think Michelle Bachmann
I missed the Tea
was the
Party.
one who coined that.
I missed the fiscal conservatives. What happened to them? They were nice.
Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about early Tea Party before it got taken over by the alt-right crazy people. I'm talking late 2006 into 2007 is about when this happened.
The very early alt-right was interesting when they were more just socially conservative, and then they got taken over by the
Right.
the
I could find ground with them. I could be like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not with you on the
Yeah.
LGBT stuff, but yeah, fiscally, we could make some reforms that I'm going to get on board with. And then they went off the fucking rails, right? Like where they are today is nowhere near where they used to be. But the point is that there are conservative, and I don't even consider a lot of these alt-right people today conservatives because they're not. They're definitely not
No.
fiscally conservative anymore. The
they're
tax stuff that they've done. I mean,
they're racial identitarians,
yeah,
and that's not
Yeah.
conservative.
no,
That's collective. That's collective thinking, which is not really in line with individual
and
thought.
right, and I would think that most conservatives would have a more pure conservatives would have a more libertarian view where, okay, if you're gay and you want to get married, I don't care. It doesn't. Why would I care? Like that, they would have that kind of mindset, like a pure conservative, which would be closer to a libertarian type of thing. These, racial identitarian? Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
I like that. I'm stealing that. These racial identitarianists, totally coined right here.
I don't like anyone who identifies themselves by race or says that a racial identity is a good thing to value. So racial identity is not good on the right or left. I don't like people who think that white people are a thing to think about collectively, nor black people are a thing to think about collectively.
I don't have a problem with people saying I'm proud of my national origin, or
Yeah,
I'm
that's very
proud
different.
of my Right. Like I'm descended on one side of my family from the Bradfords that came over on the Mayflower. I think that's cool, right? The Bradfords were here in the 1626 or
Cool.
something like I forget the date anymore.
I
They were
traced my
here.
family back to the beginning of the revolution. I haven't gone far enough back further than that though.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We've got enough people that did their DNA to figure it all out. But then on the other side of my family, I've got Polish Jews that were running from anti-Semitism in the late 1800s, ran to Sicily, probably got in trouble with the mob, and then ran away to the United States. And my great-grandfather got his American citizenship when he fought in World War I. And it's cool because we still have his dog tag that has his birth year and the year he got out of the
Very cool.
Navy, because when he got out of the Navy is when he got his American citizenship. He earned his American citizenship by fighting in World War I. It's a very cool story, cool family story. So I've got both sides, but both sides, fundamentally were immigrants that came here seeking something, that came here running from something. And I think that idea permeates a lot of what I believe and a lot of the reasons why I believe that people should have the freedom to speak and to congregate and to protest and to worship if they want to. But at the same time, the freedom of any one person to do that can't be overshadowed by somebody else's freedom to do so. And getting back to Citizens United, that's my fundamental problem, is that if speech on one side gets too loud, the speech of the others can't be heard as much. And it's one of the places where I would like an equalization measure of some kind, whether it's legislation, whether it's an amendment. Like I said, I don't like the current amendment and its structure. It's a little too restrictive. I think it would get rid of too many of the things. So I'd want to see some other kind of, and I don't know what it is. I gave you my proposal for an idea earlier, but there's fundamental issues with it, obviously.
People's freedom to do things, I think, has always been impacted by money, not just speech, but also
Sure.
freedom of press. The right to a home, depends on your ability to have money. There's a lot of things
in the
that are financial dependent.
In the election of 1800, when it came out about Thomas Jefferson getting his slave pregnant, Benjamin Franklin started, I think it was 17 different newspapers just to get the word out about Thomas Jefferson was a terrible sex pervert. So he had the funds to do it, right? He had the means and the ability to do it.
I think the best way to equalize the field, at least for me, is what I suggested, is allow. I don't think it should just be, and also I think money's ability to influence elections is somewhat less than has been suggested. And my evidence for that is see campaign Michael Bloomberg. I mean, he's a multi-billionaire who, despite flooding the market with campaign ads, couldn't get anywhere. So, he's
also a huge racist and sexist.
He has many problems. I
gotta turn the fan on, but I'm listening to you.
No problem. Go ahead. But yeah, he has many problems. But the idea that money, and of course, Donald Trump didn't spend more than Clinton. So money doesn't necessarily buy elections. I think that's
I don't think that it buys elections, but I think that, again, I'm not in favor of any speech that is meant to disenfranchise somebody else or drown them out. But we should get to the Second Amendment at some point, because we spent an hour on the first. So I want to move on to the second.
Yeah, in answer to the earlier question, on a practical level, it's mostly, well, I think there's a lot of answers to this question, but I think it's principally because the United States Supreme Court, for whatever reason, and one could speculate, and I think it's mostly because Roberts is the one holding it back. But since McDonald, they haven't really had any Second Amendment cases. There was one dealing with stun guns that was done as a kind of a throwaway. It was done in order. In Massachusetts, I think it was, and the New York State Pistol Rifle Association, of course, went nowhere because they settled at the last minute. But the fundamental problem is, if you ask me about First Amendment law, I can explain it, because there's been, depending on how you want to count, probably from Brandenburg 1968. So there's been about 70 years, give or take, of First Amendment law, and so I can walk you through levels of scrutiny, tiers, and all that stuff, right? But on Second Amendment, I can't do that, because all I really have is McDonald, and I have Heller, and I also have Miller, which is a disaster of a case, just because it's poorly written. It's just really poorly written, from 1930 whatever.
Yeah, it was
But
pre-World War II. That's all I remember.
you know, I think there is a fundamental right, as far as I'm concerned, which means an individual right to keep and bear arms. So we understood the right to keep means at least in the home. We don't yet know what the right to bear encompasses because the Supreme Court won't take a case for some reason.
Oh, I know the reason.
Well,
I know
Roberts.
the reason.
I think Roberts is keeping him out because he has institutional concerns.
I disagree. I think that he has. I think that Roberts. I think one of the reasons that conservatives get pissed off about Roberts is that he believes more in a living document than they thought that he did when he was appointed.
Mm.
And I think that Roberts knows that the decision that he would come to would piss off all of the conservatives. And he did that a lot last week, right? I mean, every conservative in the country wanted to throw him in the river last week.
Well, I thought his DACA decision didn't make any sense.
How
I
so?
thought Gorsuch's decision in the LGBT case made a lot of sense. I've talked about it quite a bit on my channel.
Yeah,
I thought it was
no,
excellent textualism. I thought it was wonderful.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it made perfect. I explained to my people on my channel, I'm like, this is a conservative legal opinion through and through.
It is.
As like, you just follow conservative principles. This is what puts out.
Sure.
No problem.
Absolutely.
But yeah, maybe I don't know if it's that he's a living constitutionalist. I think he's just concerned about the institutional legitimacy of the court, and he likes to make sure.
I think he's more of one than they expected him to be. Is all I mean. That's all. I mean.
So he's
not Alito.
He's not Alito. Although Alito, Gorsuch is my guy. Gorsuch is my new guy. It's like I was commenting to people on my channel because like Nate Brody was saying, you're not an originalist anymore, you're a textualist. I'm like, yeah, Scalia is old. Scalia's old and busted. Gorsuch is the new hotness. Apparently is where I'm sitting.
How do you feel about Souter then?
Souter, I don't like Souter.
I was joking. I was just kidding. I'm just teasing you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but the one that drives me crazy these days is Breyer. Because just would you like to ask the question at any point? That'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have. I don't know what I am. I don't know if I'm a textualist or not. Like, especially with the Second Amendment, I agree. There is a right to keep, and I think there is a right to bear. I think open carry laws are important. I agree with open carry. I support open carry. Not open loaded carry. That's something that I don't believe that you should be able to carry around a loaded weapon, but I do believe that you should be able to carry openly, unless you have a hunting license and you're out hunting. Obvious that would be a difference, or you're a security guard.
You can have a mag in the thing, but not one in the chamber. Is that the idea?
Yes, exactly. Safety
and
on
if,
all that.
And if you're a revolver, I guess you have to do the old West thing of having one chamber empty.
Well, it would have to be in a holster, and the holster would have to have a clasp or close of some kind to keep it holstered.
Oh, sure. You want a positive safety? You want a second positive safety? That's fine.
And it's fundamentally about keeping other people safe, right? It's not fundamentally about the gun itself. It's the fact that a gun, like a car, that things can happen that you don't expect, and you can unintentionally harm other people. We have to have insurance for cars. I believe that we should have to have insurance for guns. Licenses for guns or licenses for cars. You got to have a license for a gun. I think you should have to have insurance to carry.
I mean, I won't agree with that because I don't need a license for the First Amendment.
I understand that, and now we're getting to interstate commerce and stuff. I know that there's not.
Oh my God!
A constitutional.
Should we talk how much I hate working for Phil Byrne? Should I just rant about that for the next half hour and bleed from the eyes?
At some point we have to end. So no, we can do that. That would be a whole stream. Yeah. But my point is, I believe in the right to bear. And I believe in the right to keep. I think those are in the Constitution. But I do think that we should have these legislative safeguards around gun ownership and gun carry and gun bearing that aren't constitutionally supported. I totally agree. There's nothing in the Constitution that would support having to have insurance on a gun. Yeah. Totally agree. I'm just saying I would support legislation that furthered that, and I think that it should happen. That's all.
Fair enough. Now, the way I sort of think about this conceptually when it comes to the Second Amendment is I try to reason by analogy to the First Amendment, because at least to my mind it has similar language, because the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. and the Second
Sure.
Amendment says shall not be infringed. And at least to
Right.
my ear, those two phrases sound very similar. As
Sound like
like
John
I
Adams,
explain,
don't they? Don't
yeah,
they sound like John Adams wrote them?
yeah, not John Adams. Was it John Adams?
I thought so.
Anyways,
Am I? Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
but doesn't matter.
But go ahead. Yeah.
But as I was explaining, when it comes to First Amendment, because since at least Brandenburg versus Ohio in the 60s, we have all this case law and we understand like tiers of scrutiny and levels of review and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to the Second Amendment, usually I try to map it onto the first because like, well, I already have all this structure in place that
Right.
I understand. And so
Sure.
I can try to like reason by analogy. And so like some of the things that you propose might fall within the metrics of the First Amendment equivalent or analog as you're trying to reason them out. So we'd have to look to like, like time, place, manner restrictions and things like that when it comes to the Second Amendment. But I think we
Sure.
need more fundamental cases. So like whether or not insurance of some variety might be required or whether or not you might have to, I think the holster idea is more promising because that's like a time, place, manner restriction. But some of those things might pass constitutional muster, at least to me. And then
Do
John
you want to
Smith
do
gave
super chats? Because I've noticed
yeah,
you've done a bit. So
there
why
was
don't
a
we pause
couple,
for?
there's a couple here. Let me just scroll back up because I missed a few, I think. I apologize, but we're just having such an engaging discussion.
I know. I'm so interesting.
You were interesting, and I want to have.
It's the Star Trek shirt.
Well,
The Star Trek.
I mean, if I can just be clear, I want to give you all my attention because I think you're worthy of it. I'm serious.
Well, I appreciate.
I want to understand everything you're saying and try to consider it as best as I can.
And I am here for the same reason. Like I tell people all the time, my channel is not an echo chamber. There are people on my Discord who fundamentally disagree with everything, who are in my live chat on my videos who fundamentally disagree with everything I say. I do not want to have a channel on YouTube where it's all about me all the time and everybody has to agree with me. That's boring, right? I want to be challenged because that also makes my ideas better. It makes sure that my convictions are true if they're questioned and if I have an answer.
Yeah, if I can't test them, what's the point? $4.99 from Nuvi says I'm here. You can start now. Well, we've started, so you're welcome. And then I had some more. $5 from Q Squared. When you earn minimum wage, you know what your boss is trying to say. Hey, I'd pay you less if I would, but it's against the law. Chris Rock. Very fair point. Good reference.
It is.
$5 from John Smith. The Miller case was pre-NFA, given the NFA was 1934. It might be wrong, but it's fairly sure 1931. Yeah, I knew it was something around that. I didn't know if it's pre-NFA or not, but I knew it was something in that time frame. If I get the decade right or close to it, you gotta cut me some slack.
And all I knew was it was pre-World War II. That's all I could remember. So
John Smith, $10 says we have a form of insurance for guns. It's called the law. If you're even suspected of drawing a firearm, if any justifiable reason, it's a felony. Depends on your jurisdiction. Merely drawing a firearm is usually brandishing, and brandishing by itself is typically a misdemeanor. But we don't have to get into the finer points of that. $5 from John Smith, who said, and in most states, a loaded magazine inserted weapon meets the standard of a loaded weapon. You are correct, sir. Yes, you are correct that usually having a loaded magazine in the gun qualifies as a loaded firearm. You are 100% correct. So,
sure.
Yes,
and what my point was, I'm in favor of legislation that would state otherwise. That's what I was saying. Because a lot of people are surprised to hear me say that as a liberal. Like, wait, you would support legislation that would allow people to, yeah. I think that's okay as long as they're practicing, as long as they're not brandishing, for instance, as long as it's being worn somehow or in a holster somehow and the safety is on. There's not one in the chamber. Yeah, I'm totally in support of all of those types of things.
Yeah, that's fair. How I think about the Second Amendment, again, what I consider to try to look at this from a textualist, originalist perspective as I'm trying to understand the words. And when it talks about the right to keep and bear arms, and then the question is, what is an arm? And I think for me, the first half of that sentence is informing it because it talks about the well-regulated militia. And so what is the militia? The militia is every man, under the Militia Act, which still currently exists. It's the Militia Act of 1793, 1794. Someone will double check me on that for sure. But the militia is every male between 17 and 45, I think, if my memory is correct. And the unorganized militia. And so today we would say like every man and woman. But the idea, at least conceptually, seems to be that, the church bell is ringing and everyone brings the firearm, which they're familiar with, to the battlefield to use. And so the firearms that seem to be protected by the Second Amendment, therefore, would be the ones that would be in ordinary and common use. And this language, again, I'm borrowing from Heller, which used exactly this language for this reason. Because it would be the shotguns, rifles, and pistols that people are using in their ordinary everyday life for normal everyday purposes, lawful purposes. So that would presumably not include, suitcase nukes, because not a lot of purposes for that on a normal day-to-day basis, but would include stuff, the things that I talked about. So that's
not a bazooka.
Yeah,
not a bazooka at Subway.
So
right.
yeah, I would, at least for me, would exclude a bazooka, because no one would have operational familiarity from using it for normal lawful purposes on a quasi-routine basis that the Second Amendment seems to be speaking to.
Listen, if I want to hunt dragons with a bazooka.
Yeah. And then I justify this rationale also by looking to like what freedom of speech is, because some people say, well, that's not what arms mean, because they'll say like arms treaties and, arms can mean different things. But also when you look at freedom of speech, you're doing the same exact thing, because speech could mean literally any spoken word, and say, well, freedom of speech means literally the right to speak anything. But we know that's not true. And we know from case law that things like defamation are categorically excluded. They are not speech within the meaning of the word speech in the First Amendment, even though they're spoken, right?
Sure.
So in the same way that certain things would not be arms, even if they could be considered by some dictionary. So it has a quasi-technical meaning. $5 from NATO 200. Wicker v. Filburn. Ruin Justice Jack is otherwise perfecting this. Yeah, I've made videos on Wickard and Chevron and Brand X and Hour many times on my channel, and just want to get a big knife and go. And also, for that matter, Reich versus Gonzalez, which goes to marijuana being illegal. I thought Justice Scalia was wrong on that decision. Being a good originalist conservative, you'd think he'd be the other way. But no, he's upholding marijuana regulations for some reason, even though he should be on the other end of that in the Reich decision. So that's some bullshit. Let's talk about how marijuana should be legal. Let's talk
about the fact that it's 2020, and Joe Biden believes that marijuana is a gateway drug.
Yeah. In terms of police reform, I figure that legalizing marijuana would be a nice thing to do. That's got to help. It would at least prevent. It would give one less thing for the police to pull you over for. I smelled weed.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So
probably I was smoking some earlier. What's your problem?
But apparently Biden is all about that. Reefer madness life.
Literally the worst candidate in the field. Well, maybe Marianne Williamson. Okay, Marianne Williamson was worse.
She had some interesting things when you listened in terms of like some spiritual concepts that were a little bit interesting, but I actually gave money to Yang for what it was worth, because I liked what he was saying.
Well, Yang wasn't a liberal, but
I didn't what he was, and I also liked what's her name, the minority woman that no one likes to talk about, the minority combat veteran
Kamala
from
Harris?
Hawaii. No.
Oh, Tulsi Gabbard?
Tulsi Gabbard, yeah, I liked her.
Oh, God. I did whole videos about how horrible she was.
She checks all the progressive text box, man. She's a minority
Tulsi
woman.
Gabbard?
She's a minority. She's got all the qualifications the Democrats require. She's a minority woman, combat veteran. I mean, she's got everything you guys need.
No, first of all, she likes dictators a lot. A. B, she apparently likes Trump a lot. She's terrible. I did whole videos on how horrible she was. I have a video called "Is Tulsi Gabbard a Garbage Candidate?" I believe was what I called it. And anyone that thinks Tulsi Gabbard has anything to offer can go watch that. She's a horrible.
I'm assuming that you don't
person.
think she's horrible just because she wants to talk with.
No, I think she's horrible because she's part of a cult that's horribly anti-LGBTQ, and she's espoused horrible anti-LGBTQ perspectives or whatever in the past. She says now, I've gotten all over that, but she's still in the cult. She's a horrible human being. No. And Joe Biden, Joe Biden had this whole scandal. How is no one talking about the fact that he plagiarized a whole tons of different stuff? He plagiarized stuff in college. He plagiarized speeches. He claimed he graduated in top 3 of his class when he didn't. He lied about all of this stuff back in the 80s. There was a huge thing in the 1988 presidential election, I believe, where Joe Biden plagiarized a bunch of stuff. Everyone's just forgotten about it.
Well, everyone understands we're not really voting for him. We're voting for whoever the VP is, right? Because we all understand that that
Well,
person's going to
sure.
be president.
Yeah, he's going to be 81 next election. He's not running again.
Yeah,
No,
$5 from Nate gives me Gonzalez versus Reich. Thomas dissenting. The federal government may now regulate potluck suppers throughout the 50 United States. A little bit. I'm
All
like,
right.
yeah, you're right, Justice Thomas. I'm like, yeah,
All right.
Justice Thomas is pretty good most of the time. Every once in a while, he's off the reservation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know who he's going to wind up picking, but it's going to be someone I hate, I'm sure.
Well, so I've worked in politics. I've worked for a couple of PACs and stuff, and I know some people who know some people. That's all I'm really going to say.
That's fine.
If it was up to Joe Biden, and he could choose, it would probably be Kamala Harris. But Kamala doesn't want to do it. Because Kamala wants to just be elected president. She doesn't want to be the de facto president because she's Joe Biden's vice president, if that makes sense. She's been warming up to the idea. Right now, they're trying to sell him on Duckworth. I like Duckworth. I don't love Duckworth.
Duckworth is an interesting choice.
She's an interesting choice.
She's one of the less repulsive choices on the field.
Gretchen, what's her face? Governor Gretchen Whitmire. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, isn't she the one that really came down really
Michigan?
hard on some of the restrictions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've heard different things. Right. I've heard different things about whether or not she wants to, but they think she's got good name recognition and that she's been a governor, and that's always a plus.
Yeah.
So that's a high possibility. And the other one they've been pushing for really hard was I forget who the other one was, but there's four that's been. The funny thing is, okay, Amy Klobuchar. Let's talk about Amy Klobuchar for a second. As I said months ago,
interesting pick.
Hold on.
She's got the.
So I said months ago on my channel that she was, if the establishment of the DNC had their choice, Klobuchar would have been the nominee. But she's so toxic and she's such a horrible, horrible person that there weren't enough people at the establishment to back it up. I know somebody who was hired to be on her staff and lasted like 3 weeks because Amy Klobuchar in a meeting threw a pencil at her. Didn't hit her, but hit the floor in front of her. And she immediately the next day didn't go back. She was like, no, I'm not working with this crazy person.
She's got some temper issues. Yeah.
She's got some
which may not be the greatest
pills.
when it comes to controlling the button. May be a problem.
Right. So I honestly, between you and I, a few weeks ago, I didn't think it was going to be Duckworth. I now think that it's going to be Duckworth.
Yeah, Duckworth sounds promising.
Unless Harris just says, yeah, I'll do it. I think.
Well, Harris had that whole blow up over the busing thing, and also Gabbard just destroyed Harris. Destroyed her.
Yeah, she didn't come off well after that. And there was another thing too where she went after Biden or she went after Bernie or something, and it didn't sell well. I forget what it was.
Duckworth would probably be an interesting choice. She's got combat experience.
She's got combat experience. She's disabled, which is she's a person of color. She's a woman. There's a lot of different reasons why the establishment likes her.
Cool name.
Awesome. Super, the Duckworth administration. I mean, that's cool, right?
Life
the Duckworth
is like
administration.
A fairy tale here in Duckworth.
So,
it's a duck blur. Okay, never mind.
It's okay. So I would think that Duckworth is probably going to be it unless Kamala comes around. Apparently the establishment told Elizabeth Warren to go away because they were like, no, you're too old.
No, yeah.
Apparently somebody communicated to her that Price at the DNC was like, no, she's too old because she's 72 or she's 71. So they said she's too much. She's not a spring chicken anymore. So, which is sad. I liked Elizabeth Warren. A year ago, that was my candidate. So,
and there's that failed governor candidate from Georgia.
Stacey Abrams?
Yeah.
Oh, Abrams won't do it.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, maybe. I think that she Abrams has talked a lot about how she wants to fix Georgia because that's her home and stuff. I don't think she. I don't think she's a power seeker in the same way that like a Klobuchar or a Harris is. I think Stacey Abrams wants to fix Georgia. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe I've just read her wrong, but I don't see her being the candidate. Maybe she could be though. You know what's funny? You know who they really wanted to be the candidate and Biden said no on was Beto O'Rourke.
Really?
They really wanted early on they wanted Beto. Yeah. And Beto was like, no.
Such an empty shirt though.
Or the establishment said no.
Yeah.
Yeah, Beto is I don't get Beto. I don't get why anybody's in favor of Beto. I don't. He's a good orator, but like Obama had a way, and I'm not a person that loved Obama. I liked Obama. He was fine. I miss him. I miss him a lot more now than I liked him when he was in office. Let me say
well,
it that way.
I did like someone who could express things in a more rhetorical flourish.
Sure. And another thing I liked about Obama, he would face up to criticism. When somebody had a criticism of him, he had no problem saying, "Listen, here's my explanation." He wasn't always right. I didn't always agree that he was justified, but at least he would do it, right? So anyway, people are saying that like he's got Obama's oratory skill, and he doesn't. Beto is no Obama. He's fine.
I'm all about that Nikki Haley 2024 ticket, man. That's what I'm all about.
God, Nikki Haley.
I think she has it in the bag.
My dad. I definitely think she's going to be president someday.
And it'll be great if the Republicans wind up electing the first female president.
That's why they're going to run her in 2024. Guarantee it. But
also because she's just really, really good. She's great. I love her. She's great.
Yeah, she sucked the Trump dick a little too much for me to like. I lost a lot of respect for her.
She got out pretty clean though. She got out pretty clean compared to most people in the administration, which wound up indicted. So you know.
When that whole scandal came out about Haley, that she'd had like sex party. She was a swinger for a little. I forget what it was. I'm not trying to disparage her in any way, shape, or form. People want to do that. I'm totally fine with it. I just remember when the scandal came out. My dad, who's old, you know, he's our parents' age, was like, "Did you hear about the governor of South Carolina?" And I was like, "No, what?" Like I hadn't heard about it. He's like, "Well, apparently, she and her husband would just have sex with people. They would just have sex." And I was like, and for progressives like me, like
that's good for progressive cred, right?
We wouldn't like. I don't. I have friends that are polyamorous and flexiamorous and stuff. Like, I don't give a shit. Go if everybody's consenting and of age, have at you. Do what you're going to do with whoever you're going to do it with. I don't. Yeah. You know, go date the attack helicopter of your dreams.
That's a good one. Very good.
But yeah, I don't. But I do think that scandal is going to come back up. And I wonder how it's going to affect her with conservatives, because it was a big deal at the time and everyone's forgotten about it. But it will come back up. And I know that the establishment at the RNC loves Nikki Haley. They absolutely love Nikki Haley, and they believe that she can be elected. And I do too. I genuinely, and I think that she's, shall I say, Reagan-esque in her ability to lead a minority or lead the other side.
I want to work in her White House so bad. Please give me a job, Nikki.
I wouldn't call her a bridge builder. I'm not saying she's a bridge builder. Reagan wasn't a bridge builder either. He just knew how to get people from the other side to follow him anyway. And I think that she's also got that talent.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens this election. I mean, right now the polls favor Biden, but it'll be interesting to see if they debate and how
I don't believe polls.
Influence. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
I tell my audience all the time, don't listen to, I don't care what I don't care what the polls say. I don't give a shit. I used to help put poll information out for some PACs. It's all bullshit. Don't listen to any of it. Go vote. If you want your candidate to win, go vote. Go get 2 other people registered. Make sure they get to the voting. Make your plan now to go vote. If you want whoever it is that you want to win, you need to today be making your plan. Yeah. That's my advice.
And if Trump wins, then I guess we'll have to have some more fights. We'll have to more fights over the Supreme Court.
I would say
RGB cannot be long for this world. I mean, she keeps getting in and out of hospitals. How many black cats does this woman have?
Yeah. I would say right now where we're sitting, when Joe Biden was made the nominee, I said that it was 100% that Trump was going to get reelected. I think that's dropped down to about 80%. But I think it's going to be. I don't. It would be astonishing to me if Joe Biden wins this election. Absolutely, I would be completely blown away if Joe Biden wins.
He doesn't have a lot going for him, and the economy was good right up until the point of COVID, so that was plus.
Right.
So I mean, the fundamental structure of the economy is okay. Just
of the stock market. The economy. I would disagree. If the economy was good, the BLM protests would not be as big as they are.
That's fair.
Sorry.
That's fair criticism.
Yeah, the economy is surviving.
Yeah,
but fair. I don't think that it's good.
Yeah, that's fair.
Especially because, so I just got my real estate license. So I speak on a position of authority. The housing market is going to crash sometime in the next 16 months.
What city
it's
are you in?
It's going to completely fall apart. I'm in South Carolina right now. I'm about to move to North Carolina, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm a South Carolina boy. That's where I went to school, is Clemson.
Oh, you went to Clemson?
I didn't know if you knew that. Yeah. Where are you in South Carolina?
I'm in Columbia. I'm basically walking distance to USC. I could walk to USC. It would be a bit of a walk, but I could walk there.
That's where I grew up, is Columbia, so I'm familiar with the town.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'm a transplant. I'm not from here.
Well, Columbia's a great little town, isn't it? South Carolina's a great state. I love South Carolina.
Emphasis on little. No, it's not that small. Columbia's fine. It's very eclectic. We have a Democratic African-American mayor. The African-American caucus is very strong here. Everybody campaigns here. I mean, it's the capital of the state, and South Carolina is one of the early states. So that's cool. It was actually in South Carolina in 2008 was the first time that I came into contact with Barack Obama. Do you want to hear this story real quick?
Sure.
I'll tell you this story. So I was working for a PAC, and they sent me out to South Carolina because South Carolina is an early state. And he was speaking at some college in some small town here in South Carolina. I don't remember where. And I walked in. I had a box of stickers. And it was my job as a little intern to walk in with the box of stickers and pass out stickers to everybody, right? I walked in. He was speaking. And next thing I knew, I'd been standing there for 20 minutes just listening to him. He was mesmerizing in person. I can't explain. It was like hypnotism. I met Mitt Romney that year. Came this close to meeting Hillary. I was about to meet Hillary, and then she had to go, or I don't remember what happened, but didn't get to meet Hillary.
I met John McCain a couple times in his presidential run in 2000. So,
yeah,
I was because I was born in 81, so I was just 18, 19 when he was running, and I was a low-level volunteer working on the John McCain campaign. I met him twice and shook his hand and got stuff signed by him, so that was pretty cool.
I met that facetiously. I wasn't the intern. I was actually running the little thing that day. So that was supposed to be facetious. That I was
mostly did
coming
phone
in as
banks
the intern,
and walking door to door and stuff. I mean, I was unpaid.
Oh, I did that.
I was just unpaid staff.
Oh, I did. I was paid. I see. I was actually being paid by that point. I wasn't when I did it, like in 2005 into 6. I wasn't paid, but by then I was finally getting, $5-6 to pass out stickers, whatever it was. It wasn't very much, but that part of South Carolina I really like. I really like how connected it is to politics and national politics, especially. South Carolina's history in the Union. South Carolina has fundamentally changed things about this nation on several occasions. In the Revolutionary War, the British almost won because they took Charleston. Charleston was the largest port in the Union at the time, one of the largest ports in the world at the time because of the slave trade, and indigo and cotton and some other stuff too. And when the British took it, it was called their Southern Strategy, and they roared through the back country, and they almost won. There was some very smart generaling that got them to run in circles for a few months until they finally went up to Yorktown, and they were like, "Oh, the French are here," and we won. But yeah, and then South Carolina, of course, the Civil War started here, right? That happened in Charleston too.
1861, yeah.
Yeah,
I've visited Fort Sumter many times.
At 5 a.m., I believe it was either 4 or 5 a.m. I forget when the cannons went off, but that happened here too. South Carolina. So a lot of people don't realize this. I'm sure you know the story, but when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and took it back to the Congress, South Carolina was the first state to propose changes, and it was changed because Jefferson put a bunch of restrictions about the international slave trade in the Declaration of Independence, and there were 84 edits made to his document. And Benjamin Franklin was the one who originally they wanted him to write the document. He's like, no, South Carolina's in the room, so no. We'll let this 33-year-old lawyer do it. You boy, you go do it. I'm far too famous. He did. He later wrote to his daughter. He said, or maybe it was his wife. Somebody asked him about what he did about slavery in the Declaration of Independence. I think it was his wife, because his daughters weren't old enough at the time. And he said, well, slavery is like holding a wolf by the ears. You dare not, you don't like it, but you dare not let it go. And it's funny because then he went and raped his slave and impregnated her. And so he's one of my favorite historical figures because there's this dichotomy inside him. He loved books so much that he literally went broke buying books, donated them to the federal government, and started the Library of Congress. Right? He talks about in one of his letters, I think to Adams, it was after his presidency, when he went down to establish the University of Virginia, and he's talking about he was walking the grounds to measure out the University of Virginia.
First English version of the Quran he had in his library.
Yes, he did.
He also has some Arabic versions. He spoke a couple different languages.
He did. But he's writing this letter that he went out and walked the grounds, and I believe it was to Adams. It might have been to his daughter, but he said, the central idea of this university is that it's free, is that no one's ever going to pay to get taught at this university. Everyone is going to be able to come to this university and learn whatever they want, stay as long as they want, and just study and share ideas. So very interesting dichotomies within Thomas Jefferson. I like him a lot as a historical figure. I don't know that I like him as a person, but I like him a lot as a historical figure.
See, turning to politics today, like this is one of my critiques of the Black Lives Matter movement, and some of the stuff that I hear coming from the farther left part of the spectrum. Like for me, the country has always been about making a more perfect union and the process of developing it, and also about fulfilling its original promises. Frederick Douglass talked about this. The point of things is to fulfill the promise of the Declaration of Independence. We didn't have Independence Day. We need to have one of our own, and to fulfill that promise. And I think, through some very tumultuous times and a lot of struggle, we as a country have gotten a long way. We've gotten to a place where people can come from everywhere and come here, and we are a country of no natural population except for Native Americans, but most people are here and not of that ilk. And we over the time gave, originally the Constitution only really applied to white male property owners. So we've moved into a place where we granted suffrage to African Americans, we granted suffrage to women. We ended Jim Crow.
But we established it first.
Yes, but I mean we did. But let's give ourselves some credit for getting where we have, and it makes me proud to be an American. It's like we've always made things better, and I think
speaking of, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
It's just for me. I hear a lot of stuff on the left, which is like it seems to be tearing down, wanting to tear down all these structures and all these institutions. And I'm like, I don't think that's good. I think these structures are some of the greatest mankind has ever devised, and it's to build them more than to tear them down. So, one of the
maybe depending on your perspective. The Lewis and Clark expedition, the core of discovery, was either the most or the second most important thing that Thomas Jefferson did during his presidency. And Lewis and Clark, of course, were looking for the Northwest Passage, an all-water route from coast to coast, which doesn't exist. Jefferson thought that it did. Clark thought that it did, and then they learned that it didn't. But when they got to the other coast, it was about to be winter. and they had to decide, were they going to try to stay there on the coast at the beach, or were they going to go winter over with some natives?
Mm.
And they held a vote, and all of the men that were on the boat voted. York, Clark's slave, voted. Sacagawea was with them, who was a Native American woman who wasn't an American citizen or anything. She got a vote. She got to vote in this vote in Clark's book. So it was like they had all teleported, because this was 1805, 1806. I forget which winter it was. So it was like they had teleported 100 and whatever years in the future, 110 years in the future. No, more than that, because Native Americans, so 160 years in the future. And I think that promise, while beautiful, agrees with you, is overshadowed by Manifest Destiny. Because the idea of Manifest Destiny is that the people who were here before us don't deserve the land. We did. We deserved it because we established a nation here. And that's my issue with Manifest Destiny, is that it forgets that already here we're a people with a heritage, with a past, with culture that we overwrote with our own, and that we demanded they overwrite with our own too. We did terrible things to the native peoples here. So somebody asked in chat. Hold on, real quick. Hold on. Somebody asked in chat whether or not I would support tearing down a Thomas Jefferson statue. I absolutely would, 100%, because the Manifest Destiny that we built our nation upon is a lie, and it forgets about the people who were here before us. We have a responsibility as the people who are currently safeguarding the nation to find ways to make up for the wrongs that our forefathers wrought. You can like that or not like that. I fundamentally believe that we have that responsibility.
Okay. I think for me, I think that the 1619 Project is a lie. I think that America was founded on fundamental principles that we have to extol. I think the conquering of the new frontier is not a unique problem. I mean, the history of the world until relatively recently was all about conquering and taking territory through conquest. So, what we did in terms of that is no fundamentally different than what civilizations have done throughout all of history.
Sure.
So I feel like now that we're here, we have an opportunity to fulfill a great dream where we are a country built on an idea rather than a population. We're not like other countries of the world where, which we're based fundamentally on population that happen to be there. We're based on an idea, and everyone has an opportunity to be part of that. And when we think about statues of people in the past, the statues are there to represent the best parts of them, because everyone is flawed. And so when you see a statue of Jefferson or Washington or anyone else, is to recognize the great parts of what made them great. And I have no objection to talking about taking down statues of Confederate leaders, for example, because, the things that made them great were not particularly great, especially when we're talking about America as a country. But I think it's a mistake to decry their own shortcomings in not being able to see the full extent of their own vision, and be able to say, sure, you might not have been able to get as far as your vision really promised, but we honor the vision more than the man, and so we're going to make your vision come true, even though
sure,
you couldn't do it.
Right?
So
we were incapable.
Yeah, something very noble about that to me. Very inspiring.
So one of the worst things about George Washington to me, and I don't mean to bemoan all these people. I know it sounds like I am, but I don't. But he had an opportunity. His army was starving to death. Literally, they were starving to death. They didn't have shoes, right? A lot of them didn't have didn't have a gun. They didn't have anything to shoot. They just had like pitchforks and stuff. They were just farmers. They were just poor people. And he wrote in one of his letters that, and I don't remember the wording anymore, but he wrote in one of his letters to the Continental Congress, and they said, hey, do you want to we might be able to get some of the states to give some slaves to the army, and we could have entire corps of slaves. And he called them like gross or so. I forget the word that he used, but basically said, well, they're not smart enough to be soldiers. They're too dumb. And it is a huge stain on George Washington, who I agree did some great things. The reason that presidents stayed in office for 2 years for a long time wasn't a law, right?
Yeah.
It was just because Washington had done it. And so they stopped running after two.
I mean,
after
that's
two
pretty
terms.
great right there, man. I mean, that's pretty damn.
Hey, that established a precedent that didn't need to be codified into law for like 150 years or something.
And then who screwed it up? The Democrats.
I know this. God damn Democrats. By the way, you know, they used to be called the Democratic Republicans. I don't hear the Republicans talking about that very often, but I digress.
We're old school Whigs, baby. Whig party for life.
Old school Whigs. I'm a Northeast Federalist. I decided the other day that no one remembers who the Northeast Federalists are, so I'll just say that I'm one. And they'll be like, well, what does that mean? And I'll be like, well, I opposed the Louisiana Purchase. And they're like,
Bull Moose
what?
Party.
I could be Bull Moose. I could be Bull Moose. That'd be fun.
TR is my hero, though.
Listen, you know what? If Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, he would unify this nation in a way that no one else could.
No, he's pretty badass.
Right?
He's awesome.
He's
my favorite.
He was an amazing human being. He's probably my favorite. I think he was probably the best president that we ever had who wasn't a wartime president. I mean, you know, it's hard to talk. And it's hard to compare him to like an FDR, but
and also between him and Nixon, you know, they both were environmentalists. Nixon, of course, created the EPA, signed the Clean Water Act. Yeah. Roosevelt created the National Park System, and so I do somewhat regret the lack of environmental policy from the Republican Party, because, like, man, we used to lead this thing. You know, we were the leaders of this damn thing.
Wasn't it
environmental
the national
policy?
Right, the national or not national. Wait, Roosevelt did the national monuments. Someone else did the national park. Okay, I thought that was under someone else for some reason. Yeah. I must be thinking of something else. But the Republicans do have a long history of this stuff because it's a fundamentally conservative idea, right?
Right, conserve the environment and right, it's pretty conservative.
And fiscal conservatism. Hey, here's all of this land that we're gonna section off. We're gonna say it's cheap to go visit. When people want to go visit it, they're going to go visit it. It's going to remain beautiful and as pristine as we can make it. That's a fundamentally conservative idea. And the conservatives lost their goddamn minds because of fossil fuels. They really did. And now you say, like, hey, you know what's funny? Did you see Joe Biden's new climate proposal the other day?
I heard it mentioned, which is as far as I got.
Okay. So Joe Biden has proposed
about $2 trillion.
It's a $2 trillion proposal that says we're going to invest in green jobs. Okay. That sounds great. It's an infrastructure plan. It rebuilds bridges, rebuilds railroads. Yeah. But you know where he got it? The Green Party in the late 80s. It's the exact same plan that I believe it was the 1988 election that the Green Party put forward, which, by the way, became, guess what? The Green New Deal. So he literally has taken a part of the Green New Deal and proposed it.
The Green New Deal definitely has problems, for sure.
We read it one night. I have a stream where we read it. It's only 14 pages. You should do it. It's very short. It's so short and easy to get through.
Yeah,
I would love to see you do a stream and read it.
Okay. Well,
it's short. It's short. There isn't anything to it really. But my point is that this new conservatism, neoconservatism, I don't really know how to classify it. I've tried so many times and everything I've come up with has failed. This neoconservatism, though, that is against all of these ideas, like it is cheaper for us to generate energy through more green paths, whatever you want to say, than the fossil fuel paths these days. We could create more jobs. We could build better infrastructure cheaper.
A lot of the conservative skepticism on environmental policy comes from some of the government regulations thereof and some of the government impositions. But like to the extent that you were looking at ways at, like, something you could do would be, if it were up to me, I'd make all U.S. federal buildings green energy, 100% green energy,
Yeah,
because they're just
why
buying
not?
green energy. You know,
And think about how many jobs you create by converting those buildings. Like,
right.
it's a win-win.
Right. Look for ways to create tax structures so that green solar panels that are made in the USA get a special
Right.
tax benefit. You know,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Sure. Sure. And
So
progressives would be behind it.
yeah.
I'm not kidding here. I think the reason that a lot of the conservatives are not behind these types of ideas is since 2008, too many conservatives have been absolutely obsessed with owning the libs. And if it's something that the liberals like, they're just fundamentally against it. Not all of them. I'm not generalizing about all conservatives. I'm just saying too many of them are obsessed with, well, we can't do things that liberals like because I hate liberals and I want them to cry. I enjoy their tears too much.
Yeah, I think some of the structure, I think that's part of it. On a philosophical level, I think on a pragmatic level, you're right. On a philosophical level, it's about like some of it's top down and some of it's like giving the government power, which is problematic. So there are some philosophical objections to some of the structural elements. But there's ways to solve that problem that the Republicans are not currently pursuing, which is very annoying. Right. I'd also like to end the war on marijuana at a bare minimum, because it's just simply not, because I have this idea that all laws that restrict what people can do need a justification to exist. That's my premise. Like, you know, we are fundamentally a free country. Well, what does that mean? Like, everything should be allowed unless there's a reason for it not to be allowed. So the premise is everything is valid. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to impose on you to not do something, I have to have a reason. Now, a lot of those things aren't really hard. But when it comes to marijuana, it's like, okay, what is my justification for this? And I'm like, I got nothing. You know, or at least I can't make the balance work. I can't make the scales work. Whatever benefit I'm possibly achieving out of it is not worth the collective costs of it.
And look at the states that have decriminalized it or legalized it. Look at how much money they're making.
Yeah,
Colorado made $1 billion?
I'd hurt the cartels. That's a plus. I'd hurt the cartels. I'd create a new tax revenue. People would be freer. They'd be happier.
There's more jobs.
Cops would have less reasons to pull them over. There'd be more jobs. Why am I not doing this?
I don't know.
It would free up criminal justice resources. Yeah. I could free up courts to like actually hear cases that matter. That'd be nice. Right. And you know, maybe if marijuana were legal, people wouldn't necessarily do as many criminal things.
You and I listen. So you need to become Speaker of the House. I'll become Majority Leader. We're going to solve all the issues.
The thing that drives me truly crazy when it comes to marijuana, the thing that drives me absolutely insane, is that fact it's Schedule 1. Because I'm a conservative, okay? I'm a conservative, and I believe in boxes, right? I believe in boxes and definitions and things that make sense. And definitionally, to be Schedule 1, it has to have no possible medical use. Okay?
Not all boxes have to have 4 sides, okay?
You'd have to be fucking insane to think that marijuana should be Schedule 1 given that definition.
I totally agree. And the reason that it's Schedule 1 is one reason. There's only one reason, and that's so that there can't be scientific research done on it or under very controlled circumstances.
But
why?
But I'm a conservative, and they defined a box for me, and I'm like, it doesn't belong in this box.
Yeah.
Because I can read.
Yep. I know, right?
It only belongs in this box if this is true. I'm like, this isn't true. So it can't be in that box. It has to be somewhere else.
Makes no sense. Makes no sense to me
whatsoever. My conservative mind rejects it because it doesn't fit in the box you're trying to shove it into.
Huh?
So I come at it from a conservative principle. I'm like, it's supposed to have a damn definition. I believe in definitions and things. It's like it's supposed to have a definition and constraints. And I'm like, it's supposed to have no possible medical use. I'm like, are you retarded? I'd like to say it has no potential medical use. How stupid do you have to be?
I hope you mean that in the transition. Listen to me. Transmission way. Right, you mean that like a transmission?
Very good, okay. Very nice. Yes. We retard the flow. I get it. Very good.
Yes. Well, listen, it's been fun, but I have to pee.
Okay. Well, I will thank my guest, ProLib Ethan, for this time.
And I want to thank the live chat. I want to say something in the live chat. Thank you. All of you have sent me questions and stuff. I appreciate it. All of you are welcome to come to any of my shows anytime. Sunday night we do a show, and Tuesdays we do a show, and Thursdays we do a show. So come on over anytime, or you can come to twitch.tv/ProLib. All of my Twitch streams are basically...
in the link, or I don't have you as Monstaz. I should give you Monstaz.
Okay, yeah, well, Tony designs here. He's my mod.
Yeah,
He can put the link.
Tony put the link there.
YouTube.com/ProgressiveLiberal. I enjoy people that come to my space and confront me. So anybody that wants to is going to, and I'm going to have you on, sir,
Excellent.
soon. We're going to do a thing.
That'd be great.
We're going to do a thing. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the conversation and the discussion and the disagreements.
Well, thank you.
I like it.
And I will sign off, and thank you for all your participation. Till later, my friends. Cheers and goodbye.
Goodbye.